Freezing, the Black Widow snuck into the giant cowboy's home and whispered through chattering teeth, "I can bear you sons. Just don't throw me out." The townsfolk branded her cursed, 3 dead husbands, suspicious wealth, and an intelligence that threatened their simple assumptions about widowed women. They predicted her inevitable doom, outcast, forgotten, destroyed by winter or worse. But the giant cowboy who discovered her by his fireplace was no ordinary man. Wealthy beyond measure, yet isolated by his intimidating presence, betrayed too many times to trust easily. What neither realized was that this desperate midnight encounter would unravel carefully constructed lies and reveal truths powerful enough to reshape the entire territory. Would this gamble between two outcasts forge an alliance that defies every assumption, or will their hidden secrets destroy them both? The stagecoach wheel cracked against the frozen ground with a sound like gunfire. Charity Walker gripped the leather seat as the vehicle lurched to a violent stop in the Wyoming blizzard. "End of the line, lady," the driver's voice cut through the howling wind. "Ain't going no further in this weather." Charity peered through the frost-covered window at the endless white expanse. No buildings, no shelter. Nothing but snow and bitter cold stretching toward the darkening horizon. The nearest town is still 5 miles away. Her breath formed clouds in the frigid air. The driver was already unhitching the horses. "Horse broke his leg back there. Lucky we made it this far." He mounted the healthiest animal and wrapped his coat tighter. "Storm's getting worse. I gotta get these animals to safety. You cannot leave me here." But he was already riding away, leading the remaining horses through the swirling snow. His silhouette disappeared into the white void within moments. Charity stepped from the abandoned coach. The wind hit her like a physical blow, cutting through her wool coat and dress as if they were paper. Ice crystals stung her face. The cold burned her lungs with each breath. She had left Millbrook that morning amid whispers and cruel stares. The hotel clerk had refused her a room. The general store owner had watched her through narrowed eyes, his hand hovering near the shotgun behind the counter. Even the preacher had crossed the street to avoid her path. 3 dead husbands. That was her reputation. 3 men who had married her and died within months. The townspeople called her cursed. They called her worse things when they thought she could not hear. The truth was far more complicated, but explanations meant nothing to frightened minds. They saw a young black woman with suspicious wealth and an education that made them uncomfortable. They saw something that did not fit their understanding of how the world should work. Now the storm threatened to solve their problem permanently. The Black Widow would freeze to death in the wilderness, and they would whisper that it was divine justice. Charity forced herself to move. Standing still meant death. She pulled her shawl tighter and began walking through the knee-deep snow. Each step was a battle against the wind trying to knock her down. The cold crept through her boots first. Then her fingers began to lose feeling despite her gloves. Her legs grew heavy and clumsy. The rational part of her mind cataloged the signs of freezing. She had perhaps an hour before her body began shutting down. A faint yellow glow flickered in the distance. Charity stumbled toward it, falling twice in the deep drifts. The light grew larger. A house. No, a mansion. 3 stories of timber and stone rising from the prairie like a fortress against the storm. The Pike Ranch. She recognized it from descriptions whispered in town. Home to Colton Pike, the giant cowboy who owned half the county. A man who stood nearly 7 feet tall and trusted no one after too many betrayals. A man who lived alone despite wealth that could buy him anything except companionship. Charity reached the front door and pounded with numb fists. No answer. She tried the handle. Locked. The wind drove ice crystals against her face like needles. Her vision blurred. This was how it would end. Frozen on the doorstep of the richest man in the territory. She circled the house, legs barely supporting her weight. A window on the side had a loose latch. Her frozen fingers fumbled with it until the frame swung open. She tumbled through onto a hardwood floor. The warmth hit her like a physical embrace. A massive stone fireplace dominated the room, flames crackling behind iron grating. Charity crawled toward it, her body shaking violently as feeling returned to her extremities. She had broken into Colton Pike's home. If he found her, he could have her arrested, or worse. But the alternative was death in the storm. Heavy footsteps echoed from the front hall. The front door opened and closed with a boom that shook the walls. The footsteps moved closer. Charity struggled to her feet, using the fireplace mantel for support. She smoothed her dress and tried to compose herself. Everything depended on the next few moments. Colton Pike filled the doorway. Every story about his size had been understated. He stood nearly 7 feet tall with shoulders that seemed to span the entire frame. His presence was overwhelming, intimidating in a way that went beyond physical dimensions. His eyes locked onto hers. Surprise flashed across his weathered features, followed quickly by suspicion. "How did you get in my house?" Charity's mind raced. She had one chance to save herself. One desperate gamble that played into everything she had heard about this lonely giant who craved family and legacy above all else. "I can bear you sons." The words came out steadier than she felt. "Just don't throw me out." If you are enjoying this story of how a desperate winter night changes two outcasts forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next 15 minutes in this isolated Wyoming ranch will completely change everything these two characters thought they knew about survival, partnership, and the power of hidden truths. Colton Pike stared at the woman by his fireplace. Her offer hung in the air between them like smoke from the crackling logs. "Sons, the one thing his wealth could not buy. You are the Black Widow." His voice rumbled low and cautious. 3 dead husbands, 3 unfortunate men. Charity kept her chin raised despite her trembling. "But I am very much alive, and I have proven fertile." Colton moved closer, his massive frame casting shadows across the room. "What makes you think I want sons badly enough to trust a woman who kills her husbands?" "Because you have been searching for a wife for 5 years. Because every marriageable woman in 3 territories has rejected your proposals. Because you are nearly 40 with no heir to inherit all of this." The accuracy of her words made him pause. She had done her research. That required intelligence most people underestimated in a woman. "Sit." He gestured to a leather chair near the fire. "You are half frozen." Charity settled into the chair, her eyes scanning the room with sharp focus. Financial ledgers lay scattered across a massive oak desk. Property deeds hung in frames along the walls. A half-finished letter sat beside an inkwell, the handwriting cramped and labored. "You handle your own bookkeeping." She nodded toward the desk. "Cannot trust accountants. They steal. Yet your cattle operation loses money every winter." Charity's observation was matter of fact, not accusatory. "Your shipping costs are triple what they should be. And you are paying taxes on land you do not actually own." Colton's eyes narrowed. "How could you possibly know that?" "The territorial tax records are public. Your shipping contracts with the railroad are filed with the Territorial Commerce Office. Your cattle counts are reported to the Livestock Commission." She gestured toward the scattered papers. "Anyone who can read can piece together your financial situation. Most women cannot read. Most women were not taught by their first husband who happened to be a banker." Colton studied her with new interest. The desperate woman at his door was displaying knowledge that impressed him. Few men in the territory understood business with such clarity. "Your first husband taught you banking." Charity's expression grew distant. "Marcus owned the First National Bank of Denver. He was 63 when we married. I was 19. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He suffered from poor health, knew he was dying. He wanted someone to understand his business before he passed." "Why you?" "Because I was the only person who asked intelligent questions about his work instead of just his money." The story rang true. Colton had met enough gold diggers to recognize genuine curiosity when he heard it. "What about the other 2 husbands?" "Thomas owned a shipping company in Colorado. He taught me about transportation and logistics before consumption took him." Charity's voice remained steady. William had mining interests in Nevada. He showed me how to evaluate land and mineral rights before his heart gave out. 3 older men, 3 different industries, 3 teachers who had given her an education most men would envy. Colton began to see the pattern. You learned from all of them. I learned everything I could. Knowledge was the only inheritance that could not be stolen or lost. Colton walked to his desk and picked up the shipping contract she had criticized. The rates were indeed excessive. He had suspected it but lacked the expertise to negotiate better terms. How would you reduce these costs? Ship your cattle east to Chicago instead of west to San Francisco. The railroad competition keeps eastern rates lower. You could cut costs by 60% and reach bigger markets. The suggestion was brilliant in its simplicity. Colton had been following the same shipping patterns for years without questioning their efficiency. What about the tax problem? You are paying taxes on the Henderson property even though the deed was never properly transferred after his death. File a quit claim with the territorial office. Save yourself $800 annually. Colton set down the contract. This woman understood his business better than he did. Her knowledge was precise, practical, and immediately valuable. Why tell me this? You could have kept such information to yourself. Because partnership requires good faith. Charity leaned forward slightly. I am not here to deceive you, Mr. Pike. I am here to propose a mutually beneficial arrangement. Sons in exchange for shelter. Sons in exchange for legitimacy. Her correction was subtle but important. You need an heir. I need social standing that marriage provides. But more than that, you need someone who understands business. Someone who can help you maximize the potential of your holdings. Colton felt something shift in his understanding. This was not a desperate woman seeking rescue. This was a negotiation between equals. What do you really want, Mrs. Walker? I want to build something that lasts, something bigger than what either of us could create alone. She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the storm. I have resources you do not know about, properties, investments, connections across multiple territories. How much are you worth? More than this ranch, possibly more than all your holdings combined. The claim should have sounded like boasting. Instead, it carried the weight of fact. Colton realized he had completely misjudged the situation. The Black Widow was not seeking his charity. She was offering him a business proposition. Show me. His voice carried new respect. Show me what you have built. Charity turned from the window, a small smile playing at her lips. That, Mr. Pike, is where our real conversation begins. Charity spread a collection of property deeds across Colton's dining table. Each document bore official territorial seals and her signature as owner. The papers covered land from Colorado to Montana, including prime railroad routes and mineral rights. 15 properties, 4 operating businesses, 3 mining claims with proven silver deposits. She pointed to specific locations on a territorial map. Combined value exceeds $200,000. Colton examined the documents with growing amazement. The properties formed a strategic network across the Western territories. Each location offered unique advantages for trade, transportation, or resource extraction. How did you acquire all of this? Carefully, quietly, using different names and legal representatives. Charity traced trade routes on the map. Most sellers never knew they were dealing with the same buyer. The scope of her planning impressed him. While he had focused on building one massive ranch, she had created a business empire spanning multiple territories. Your reputation as the Black Widow provided perfect cover. Colton began to understand her strategy. People avoided you, which meant they ignored your business activities. Fear can be useful when properly managed. Over the following weeks, their partnership transformed both of their operations. Charity's shipping connections reduced Colton's cattle transportation costs by half. Her mining contacts provided reliable buyers for timber from his forested land. Her financial knowledge eliminated wasteful spending that had drained his profits for years. Colton's established reputation opened doors that had remained closed to Charity despite her wealth. Territorial officials who had dismissed her signed contracts without question when his name appeared on documents. Business leaders who had refused her meetings welcomed her when she arrived as his partner. Their combined resources created opportunities neither could have achieved alone. They established a freight company connecting their properties. They negotiated exclusive contracts with railroad developers. They bought struggling businesses at reduced prices and made them profitable. The evening conversations became as valuable as their business meetings. Charity's quick wit matched Colton's strategic thinking. Her education filled gaps in his knowledge, while his practical experience grounded her theoretical understanding. You never learn to trust people. Charity observed one evening as they reviewed contract proposals. Every agreement assumes betrayal. Experience teaches caution. Partners have cheated me before. I am not your previous partners. She met his gaze directly. My success depends entirely on your success. Betraying you would destroy everything I have worked to build. The logic was sound, but Colton's past had taught him that logic often failed when money was involved. Still, Charity had proven her commitment through actions rather than words. She shared financial information freely. She included his name on new ventures. She made herself vulnerable in ways that required genuine trust. Their personal relationship evolved alongside their business partnership. Shared meals became longer. Conversations extended late into the evening. The practical arrangement gradually included elements of genuine affection. Charity brought intelligence and education to his isolated world. Colton provided security and social legitimacy she had never experienced. Both discovered the relief of finding someone who understood their ambitions without fear or jealousy. But their success created new problems. Morrison, the territorial bank president, had profited for years from Colton's inefficient business practices. The improved operations reduced his income from inflated loans and unnecessary financial services. Sheriff Klein had supplemented his salary by collecting bribes from competitors who wanted access to Colton's business. The new partnership eliminated those opportunities. Local business leaders who had charged excessive prices for goods and services found themselves replaced by Charity's more efficient suppliers. Their comfortable monopolies crumbled under competitive pressure. The Pike woman is destroying our established arrangements. Morrison spoke quietly with Klein and three other prominent businessmen in the bank's back office. Her interference threatens everyone's livelihood. She is not his wife yet, just a business partner. Klein fingered the badge on his vest. Business partnerships can be dissolved. How do we separate them? Investigation. If the Black Widow's wealth came from illegal sources, we can have her arrested. Pike would distance himself to protect his reputation. The plan required careful execution. Open opposition would fail against Colton's political influence and Charity's legal knowledge. They needed evidence of wrongdoing that would force legitimate authorities to act. Strange men began appearing in neighboring towns, asking questions about Charity's previous marriages. They offered money for information about suspicious circumstances surrounding her husband's deaths. They requested copies of property transfer documents and marriage certificates. Federal Marshal Thompson arrived from Denver to investigate reports of fraudulent land claims. His inquiry focused specifically on properties owned by recent widows, particularly those involving deceased husbands from multiple territories. Charity noticed the increased attention, but continued her business activities without visible concern. She had anticipated eventual scrutiny of her rapid wealth accumulation. Her legal documents were legitimate. Her property acquisitions followed proper procedures. What she had not anticipated was how thoroughly her enemies would investigate the details of her past. The careful fiction she had constructed about her marriages contained elements that would not survive intensive federal review. Someone is asking detailed questions about your husbands. Colton shared information gathered by his own contacts. They want death certificates, marriage records, witness statements. Let them investigate. I have nothing to hide. But Charity's confident response could not mask the concern in her eyes. Her success depended on secrets that had seemed safe when she was merely a feared widow operating in the shadows. Now, as the prominent business partner of the territory's most powerful rancher, those same secrets threatened to destroy everything she had built. The federal investigation was just beginning. Marshal Thompson spread documents across the sheriff's desk like evidence at a trial. Death certificates, marriage licenses, and property transfers created a damning timeline of Charity's movements across 3 territories. Marcus Walker died in Denver 6 months after marriage. Thomas Hayes died in Colorado Springs 4 months after marriage. William Carter died in Nevada 3 months after marriage. Thompson's finger traced the dates. Each death occurred just long enough to establish legal inheritance rights. Sheriff Klein leaned forward with barely concealed satisfaction. Suspicious timing. More suspicious is what happened after each death. Thompson produced additional documents. The widow immediately sold all inherited property and disappeared. No mourning period. No family connections maintained. Morrison examined a bank record with growing excitement. Look at this transfer amount from the Nevada property sale. $40,000 moved to a territorial bank in Wyoming just 2 weeks before she appeared at the Pike Ranch. The marshal nodded grimly. She targets wealthy older men, marries them quickly, waits for convenient deaths, then moves to new territory with the inheritance. What about the men themselves? Klein asked. Thompson's expression grew troubled. That is where the investigation becomes complicated. I cannot locate burial records for any of the 3 husbands. The revelation sent excitement through the gathered conspirators. Missing burial records suggested something far worse than convenient timing. Bodies were probably disposed of secretly. Morrison's voice carried conviction despite lacking evidence. She murdered all 3 men. Can you prove it? Klein asked. I can prove the marriages were fraudulent. Property transfers based on fraudulent marriages can be reversed. She would lose everything. The legal strategy was elegant in its simplicity. They could not prove murder, but they could challenge the validity of her wealth acquisition. Without legitimate ownership of her properties, Charity would become genuinely destitute. Word of the investigation spread through Millbrook like wildfire. The Black Widow's past was finally catching up with her. Townspeople who had feared her cursed reputation now spoke of her as a calculating murderess who had fooled them all. Colton learned about the investigation from his foreman, who had overheard conversations at the general store. The details were disturbing enough to shake his growing trust in Charity. They say she poisoned all 3 husbands. The foreman spoke quietly, as if Charity might overhear from inside the house. Federal marshal found evidence of fake marriages and stolen property. Colton's mind raced through everything he knew about his partner. Her extensive business knowledge, her wealth that seemed too large for legitimate inheritance, her careful evasion of specific details about her husband's deaths. Had he been manipulated by a skilled predator? That evening, Colton confronted Charity in his study. She sat reading a legal document with the same focused attention she applied to all business matters. Marshal Thompson is investigating your previous marriages. Charity looked up without visible alarm. I expected as much. Morrison and his friends need ammunition for their attacks. Are the marriages legitimate? Define legitimate. Her response was careful, lawyer-like. Were you actually married to those men? Did they actually die natural deaths? Did you inherit their property legally? Charity set down the document and met his gaze directly. The marriages are documented with proper legal authorities. The deaths are recorded with territorial offices. The property transfers follow established inheritance law. Her answers were technically accurate, but avoided the emotional core of his questions. Colton recognized evasion when he heard it. That is not what I asked. What are you really asking, Colton? Whether I murdered 3 men for money, whether our partnership is built on blood and deception. The blunt phrasing forced him to examine his suspicions honestly. Did he believe Charity capable of murder? The woman who had shared meals with him, discussed literature, shown genuine concern for his business welfare. But people had surprised him before. His previous business partners had seemed trustworthy until they embezzled thousands of dollars. His former fiancée had appeared devoted until she eloped with his closest friend. I am asking for the truth. Charity stood and walked to the window overlooking their successful cattle operation. The sight of their shared achievement seemed to strengthen her resolve. The truth is complicated, more complicated than you are prepared to understand. Try me. The truth would endanger people I care about, people whose safety depends on certain secrets remaining hidden. Her protection of others might have been admirable, but it left Colton with more questions than answers. If she could not trust him with the truth after months of partnership, what did that say about their relationship? Morrison is claiming you defrauded your way to wealth through fake marriages. Thompson is threatening to seize all your property. Our business empire could collapse if those accusations stick. Colton's voice carried frustration and fear. I need to know what I am defending. You are defending a partnership that has made you more successful than you ever imagined. You are defending a woman who has been completely honest about her business abilities and intentions, but not about her past. My past is my responsibility. The distance in her voice hurt more than Colton expected. After months of growing intimacy, she was withdrawing behind walls of secrecy that excluded him from her most important decisions. If you cannot trust me with the truth, maybe our partnership was a mistake. Charity turned from the window with an expression of profound sadness mixed with determination. Maybe it was. Three men rode into Millbrook on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. They were tall, well-dressed, and bore an unmistakable family resemblance to Charity Walker. The eldest dismounted outside the hotel with the confidence of a man accustomed to respect. "We are here to see Mrs. Charity Walker," he told the desk clerk. "Tell her that Marcus, Thomas, and William have arrived." The clerk's face went white. Those were the names of the Black Widow's dead husbands. Word spread through town faster than a prairie fire. The dead men had returned. Charity's victims had somehow survived her murderous schemes. The impossible had become reality on Main Street. Marshal Thompson intercepted the three men before they reached the Pike Ranch. His hand rested on his weapon as he studied their faces. "You gentlemen match the descriptions of three deceased individuals: Marcus Walker, Thomas Hayes, and William Carter." The eldest man smiled with calm amusement. "We match those descriptions because those are our names, though our relationship to Mrs. Walker is not what people assume." "Explain." "We are her brothers." The revelation hit Thompson like a physical blow. Brothers, not husbands, not victims. Family members who had participated in an elaborate deception that spanned multiple territories and years. The marriages were fake. The marriages were legal fictions designed to transfer property rights safely. Our sister needed social protection that only marriage could provide in territories hostile to unmarried women of color. Thompson studied the documents the men produced: birth certificates showing the same parents, letters establishing their true relationships, legal papers proving their willing participation in the property transfers. Why fake your deaths? Because dead husbands cannot be questioned about their wives' business activities. Living brothers can be traced, investigated, potentially endangered. The scope of their planning impressed even the skeptical Marshal. The Walker family had created identities, established residences, built relationships, and executed complex legal maneuvers across multiple jurisdictions. What was the purpose of this deception? Marcus Walker, the eldest brother, met Thompson's gaze with steady conviction. Survival, success, and helping others achieve the same. The full truth emerged over the following hours. The Walker siblings had been born into slavery in Virginia. They escaped together in 1863 during the chaos of war. Their parents died during the dangerous journey north. Charity possessed unusual intelligence and an aptitude for numbers that attracted attention from abolitionists in Philadelphia. They provided education while her brothers learned trades and business skills. The family moved west after the war, seeking opportunities in territories where their past would not follow. But success required legitimacy that the law denied to former slaves, especially women. The fake marriages solved multiple problems simultaneously. Charity gained social status and legal protection. Her brothers established separate identities in different territories. The family accumulated wealth and property through seemingly unconnected transactions. We helped dozens of families establish legitimate businesses and property ownership, Thomas explained to the growing crowd outside the marshal's office. Former slaves, displaced families, anyone seeking a fresh start in territories controlled by hostile local authorities. Their network had operated like an underground railroad for economic freedom. Charity's reputation as the cursed Black Widow kept suspicious officials from investigating too closely. Her brother's supposed deaths eliminated potential witnesses to their activities. The money came from legitimate business ventures. Every dollar, William confirmed. We bought undervalued properties, improved them, and sold them at fair market prices. We established shipping routes, negotiated favorable contracts, invested in growing communities. Marshal Thompson found himself in an unusual position. The investigation had uncovered elaborate deception, but the underlying activities were not only legal but admirable. The Walker family had broken no laws while helping others achieve economic independence. More importantly, their work had contributed significantly to territorial development. Towns had grown around their businesses. Trade routes they established brought prosperity to entire regions. Their success had benefited everyone. Colton arrived as the crowd gathered around the three men. His eyes searched for Charity but found only her brothers explaining their family's history to amazed listeners. "Where is she?" Marcus gestured toward the edge of town. "Preparing to leave. She believes your partnership is finished now that the truth is revealed." The words hit Colton with unexpected force. While he had been questioning her trustworthiness, Charity had been protecting a noble enterprise that helped vulnerable families build better lives. She was never the Black Widow. She was a brilliant woman using the only tools available to achieve success in a world designed to prevent it, Thomas said. The fear and superstition worked in her favor, so she allowed people to believe what they wanted. Colton realized his terrible mistake. He had doubted the woman who had shared her wealth, knowledge, and trust with him. He had believed gossip and suspicion over months of demonstrated loyalty. The community's reaction was equally transformative. People who had feared and shunned Charity now understood her true purpose. She had not been taking advantage of their prejudices, but working around them to help others achieve prosperity. Morrison and his allies found their accusations crumbling. The investigation that was supposed to destroy Charity instead revealed her as a heroic figure whose success had benefited the entire territory. But revelation had come too late. Charity was already gone, taking only personal belongings and leaving behind the business empire she had built with Colton's partnership. Colton found Charity at the abandoned stagecoach where their story had begun. She sat on a wooden crate beside the broken wheel, a single travel bag at her feet. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the snow that had nearly claimed her life months earlier. "Running away seems unlike you." Charity did not look up from the letter she was writing. "Strategic retreat. Our partnership was built on trust that no longer exists. I was wrong. You were logical. A woman with my reputation and secrets would make any reasonable person suspicious." She folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. "Your caution protected your interests." Colton dismounted and approached slowly, as if she might flee like a wild animal. "Your brothers explained everything: the network, the families you helped, the legitimate business empire you built. My brothers explained what they chose to reveal. There are still secrets you do not know." The admission surprised him. After everything that had been exposed, she still held information back. "Tell me." Charity finally looked up, her expression mixing exhaustion with determination. The Walker Family Network extends beyond business success. We have helped over 200 families establish legitimate lives across 7 territories. Former slaves, displaced immigrants, widows with children, anyone society would discard. The scope was staggering. While he had focused on building one successful ranch, she had created an entire system for social transformation. Why hide that? Because revelation endangers everyone we have helped. Success makes them targets for people who profit from keeping others powerless. Colton began to understand the weight she had carried. Every decision affected not just her own welfare, but the safety of hundreds of families who depended on her network remaining secret. Morrison and his allies wanted to destroy you to protect their control. They still do. This investigation may be finished, but the threat remains. People like Morrison exist in every territory. They will find new ways to attack what we have built. The evening air grew cold as shadows lengthened. Charity stood and picked up her travel bag with the finality of someone making an irrevocable decision. Where will you go? California. My brothers have established contacts there. We can start fresh without endangering the network here. What about our partnership, the businesses we built together? Transfer my ownership to the families we employ. They deserve the security of legitimate property ownership. The generosity was typical of her character, but it solved nothing. Colton realized he did not want her property or businesses. He wanted her. Stay, the simple word carried more emotion than he intended. Charity paused, her hand gripping the travel bag handle. Why? Because running solves nothing. Because your work here is not finished. Because I need you. The last admission surprised them both. Colton Pike had built his success on self-reliance and distrust of others. Admitting need went against everything he had learned about protecting himself. You need a business partner. You can find others. I need you, Charity Walker, not your knowledge or your wealth or your network. You. She set down the travel bag and studied his face with the same analytical attention she applied to complex business problems. The town council called an emergency meeting for tomorrow evening. They want to discuss our partnership and its impact on community stability. The threat was obvious. Local authorities would find new ways to separate them or drive them out entirely. Let them discuss it. We have broken no laws. Our success has brought prosperity to this region. Success threatens people who profit from others' failures. Then we change the system instead of running from it. Charity's expression shifted as she recognized the revolutionary nature of his proposal. Instead of accepting the limitations imposed by prejudice and fear, they could challenge the structure itself. How do we change a system designed to exclude us? With the same intelligence and determination you used to build your network. But this time, we work in the open. The idea was audacious. Rather than operating in shadows and secrecy, they would make their humanitarian work visible and legitimate. They would force the community to choose between prosperity and prejudice. That is extremely dangerous. Everything worthwhile involves risk. The next evening, half the territory gathered in Millbrook's largest meeting hall. Charity and Colton entered together, presenting a united front against whatever opposition awaited. Morrison stood to address the crowd, but Marshal Thompson interrupted before he could speak. Before accusations are made, the federal government has completed its investigation. The Walker Family Network is not only legal but exemplary. Their business practices and humanitarian work will serve as a model for territorial development. The official endorsement undermined Morrison's planned attack. Thompson continued with details of the investigation's conclusions. The Walker Network had generated thousands of dollars in legitimate tax revenue. Their businesses had created jobs for hundreds of people. Their success had attracted additional investment to the region. The federal government recommends expanding their operations with full territorial support. Dr. Martinez, whose practice had treated many families helped by the network, stood to speak. My patients include dozens of families who found prosperity through Mrs. Walker's assistance. Their children attend our schools. Their businesses support our community. Other voices joined in support. the schoolteacher whose classroom benefited from donations, the preacher whose church had been built with network funding, business owners who had profited from the increased population and economic activity. Morrison's allies found themselves outnumbered by community members who had benefited directly from the network they wanted to destroy. The final vote was overwhelming. Millbrook would officially support the expansion of humanitarian and business operations. Local authorities would cooperate with federal recognition of the network's legitimacy. 6 months later, Charity and Colton stood before the same crowd for their wedding ceremony. The Black Widow had become Mrs. Pike, but more importantly, she had become a symbol of how intelligence and determination could overcome prejudice and fear. Their combined network now operated openly across 9 territories, helping families achieve economic independence while building legitimate businesses. The model attracted support from federal authorities and humanitarian organizations. The giant cowboy and the woman once known as the Black Widow had proven that partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose could transform not just individual lives, but entire communities.